Hi, I'm Peter Roper. This is another serving of Potluck Politics. We're calling this show the No Show, if you haven't figured it out from my hat. My apologies to our non-Groton viewers, because this is all about what people in Groton must vote on this year. Then again, you might find it interesting, so stay with us if you do. Those of you who do live in Groton should definitely stay tuned, because the Groton Charter, which specifies the rules organizing our town, could be changed negatively. This is the innocuous text of this year's referendum question, which may confuse you when you get to the booth. Quote, shall the Town of Groton Charter be amended and revised, all as set forth in the November 2017 final report of the 2016 Town of Groton Charter Revision Commission and as on file with the town clerk, unquote. We will attempt to explain what drastic changes voting for that question will mean to Groton. I have three panel members, thank you gentlemen for joining me, here today to discuss the issue with me and tell you why vote no November 6th. Jean-Claude Ambroise.
Ambroise, yes.
Bruce Flax, Chuck Stevens. So just introduce yourself quickly and then we'll move on.
Thank you for having me. My name is Jean-Claude Ambroise, and I've been a Groton resident for 15 years. I was a RTM member elected by the people in District 2 for 8 years, and 2 of those years I was a moderator of that meeting.
Bruce Flax. I am a 23-year resident of the town. I served in the town council for 9 years, and I was the mayor of the town when this charter proposal was rejected.
I'm Chuck Stevens. My wife and I are senior citizens. We have been residents of Groton for more than 25 years. Neither one of us have ever run or held public office, but I do volunteer on one of the town boards and have for about 18 years.
Thank you all for caring for Groton. And I guess we can blame you because you were the mayor when this got started. But we'll hear more about that before we get done.
We'll learn more.
We're not going to blame anybody at this group. Just a quick history of the initiative. The 11-member Charter Revision Commission was charged in May of 2016 with studying and revising the town charter as needed. After numerous meetings and public hearings, their final report came out in November of 2017. It was rejected by the town council, but then by petition it was put on this year's ballot. This is what you will see on November 6th. The 3 major changes and why you should be voting no. And we'll have each person talk a little bit about these topics. So Jean-Claude is going to go first, talking about the RTM and the Board of Finance, which is a change.
Well, thank you.
Big change.
Yes. As it states in the current charter revision changes, what they plan on doing is eliminating the RTM, which is a 41 representative member body. It's a diverse group of community advocates. They're your neighbors. They're your friends. They all get elected by their specific district, and their minority representation applies in this forum.
Meaning Republicans and Democrats.
Yes, correct. So there is a fair balance in, again, a cross-section of political parties. They are the final approval on the town council budget, and they have the ability to restore funding that the town council has reduced, and they can, again, final approval is pretty much essential to the Groton government running on time. They are the closest individuals to the people, and like I said before, they're your neighbors and your friends. I was on the RTM for 8 years, and I knew pretty much everyone in my neighborhood, and they knew that I was representing them. But I'm not only representing that part of Groton, but I'm also representing the diverse town of Groton that we all live in. So we are also advocates for the entire town and the services that they need. They are a check and balance to the town council, and one of the important powers that they do have is the power to veto any legislative ordinance that is approved by the town council. And I think that is a critical check and balance in the laws that we have here in town. And there's a deliberate line-by-line approach to the budget. We will go through with a fine-tooth comb in the various departments that town operations has. And we also approve budgets for the subdivisions as well, which is very important for the city of Groton as well as Groton Long Point, which are subdivisions in the town. And the last one that I would say that the RTM has that's very important is the power of initiative. So they have an ability to make the town council act in a specific way, and if they don't approve it in a specific amount of time, they have the ability to bring that question to the voters. And matter of fact, Peter, you were discussing on how this charter revision was actually started with the town council. It actually started with the RTM. The RTM made that power of initiative to request the ability to consider an annual budget referendum, and that ended up turning into the Charter Revision Commission that was appointed by Mr. Flax and the town council. Some of the arguments for the people that want to eliminate this RTM is that they don't do their job, and there's poor attendance, and there's also 80% of the budget they can't really do anything with because of employee contracts. I tend to disagree on this. They do their job, and they do it well, because we have delivered on-time budgets consistently for the town of Groton for years, and especially as long as I've been on the RTM, that's what was really important. Voters won't be able, and we'll talk about annual budget referendum in a moment, the voters won't have that ability to vote on those employee contracts either in this, so that to me is a moot point. And the town council and the Board of Education are those bodies that are the ones that do that. And voters should have their say. That was one of the arguments that they were talking about, and where their taxpayers' dollars are spent.
And indirectly, there's an effect on these issues because the budget number is what's being talked about.
Yes, you're only talking
these accounts, and that can affect employees and benefits.
Exactly, and when we talk about the never-ending budget referendums that could be proposed, when the new fiscal year comes, checks need to be paid, gas tanks need to be filled, and there could become some sort of government uncertainty on how we operate. And the last point I'd like to make on the RTM, Peter, is that the RTM really does do the work, okay? And the voters do have a say, because we elect those individuals in to do things in our best interest. They do the work so that the Groton citizens don't have to. Moving on to what they want to replace it with would be the Board of Finance. And the Board of Finance would be a 7-member Board of Finance that has no effective power in town.
By district. Right?
And it would be represented by district, so you would only have one from each district, and minority representation does not apply to this group, which is quite disturbing in my opinion. The individuals would pretty much duplicate the function of what the town council already does today. So I don't understand how that would actually make Groton improved.
Except that they have no clout at all.
They would have no clout.
It's advisory, as I understand.
It is advisory only, and the main concern that I have with this is what happens if the town council doesn't want to do what their Board of Finance says. Does it turn into a bully pulpit? And then does it become politically activated? So then when that annual referendum comes up, that to me is a little bit troubling. One of the other things that with that Board of Finance is basically duplicating exactly what town government does already. We have 3 opportunities every month to contact our citizens and citizen comments in those public meetings. And in very few cases, not many people show up. The times when they do show up is usually during budget deliberations, and a lot of times they have compelling arguments why they should save or reduce certain budget items. So that system is already working and working well, and is very improved for Groton.
Thank you. I was on the RTM too, and my experience quite a while ago was that the RTM does a good job, and the committees look at things seriously, and because it's a group from each district, if people don't show up, you still usually have representatives. So.
Sure.
So this is going to be more limited, I think.
Yes.
Okay, Bruce, let's hear about the referendum.
Yes. So
I think my sense is this is what drove this whole thing. This is the issue that really got people.
I agree.
To push this and then send it to the voters.
That's right. Their moniker have a say, and it's your budget, your vote. But that's let's start from the beginning. The budget referendum would seemingly replace the RTM. That's the point. Is that instead of 41 people voting on the budget, there would be a whole town voting on the budget.
Whoever shows up.
Whoever shows up. Well, that's the whole point.
It's probably not going to be the whole town, because the whole town never shows up to vote.
The first, let's say, issue that I have with it is that there's no minimum voter turnout, which is something that the town council asked them to put in. And so, where one of the arguments for the Charter Revision Commission was that the RTM doesn't always show, so you may have, 30 out of 41 people, or, 60%, and that was unacceptable. Now they're saying that no matter who shows up in the town to vote, whatever number it is, it's okay, which seems a little hypocritical. So if 10% or 15% of the voting population shows up, that's enough to pass or reject a budget.
And this is the third Tuesday in May, which is not a time when we normally vote. So,
that's right.
So
that's right. Now you've tried to get people to come out, so then it becomes really special interest. The people who really believe that they want to keep their taxes low are going to try to get people to come out, and the people who are pro-school, let's say, don't want to see a school budget cut, are going to come out, and it becomes an argument back and forth. Where I think that the RTM handled that argument very well. There was enough.
Because there are public hearings when people talk about
these
issues,
they can see and people
each
can
group
watch and see.
Makes their case
That's right.
to the council and the
So we did ask for a minimum voter turnout, and they did not put one in. We also suggested a trigger for the referendum. So if it could have been 2% and 2.5% higher. If it hit that trigger, then it would call for a referendum, and they rejected that as well.
So when you say trigger, you mean a certain number of people signing a petition?
No, a certain number of the budget exceeded a certain amount.
Right.
So because I think if you look at the budget over the last 8 to 10 years, I think the average increase is like under 2% a year. And so if there's an expectation that the budget has to go up because of salaries and the such. So 2% maybe if it exceeded that. We tried to give them some kind of guidance, and that was rejected as well. Third problem with the budget is every time there's a referendum, and it's unlimited. I don't think it's unlimited actually. I think there's a certain, if it's not passed by a certain date, I believe, but it's like $25,000 cost per every time there's a referendum. They would be every
2 weeks.
2 weeks, right? And so the ability to get absentee ballots out and get the people to understand, get citizens to understand what was changed in the budget and what they're voting on, I think is a big jump to make. It's an impossibility. You were talking about the knowledge of the citizens and how they would, whether they really would take the time to understand the budget. On the last budget cycle that I was involved with, I think 2017, from the IT department in the town, there were 42 clicks on the budget on the website and 37 downloads. That's not a big number, a large number of people who are going to do it. And I think that proves the point that your everyday citizen doesn't have the time to go out and learn the budget line by line, and that's what the RTM and the town council do. They go through it line by line, and they learn it, and they figure it out, and they make their recommendations.
Yeah. My feeling is when people commit to be on the RTM or the council, they commit to doing a certain amount of work, and generally that means they're willing to put in the time and take it seriously. Average citizens just aren't going to
agreed, and I think
focus the way they need to.
JC can attest to this, that the RTM people, they do the work. They have committee meetings before they go to the
as I remember, it was over a couple of months that they looked at the budget specifically, but during the whole year, you're looking at different items, different issues, different parts of the government. So
yeah,
it's an ongoing thing.
And one thing to piggyback on that, every RTM meeting does have an open forum, like I said, for citizen comments for anyone in the public who has a concern with certain spending in the town, as well as a specific item on the agenda, which we put in probably about 6 years ago, talking specifically about budget issues so that we could have that discussion. And then if you look back at many of the minutes, there was no discussion, even by the people that are saying they want to make these changes, and they were on the RTM themselves. Just to go again, what Mr. Flax said, we also have 3 choices at the ballot box if the referendum does come into fruition. You would have to either vote yes, or that you approve the town council and the Board of Education budget separately, or you could say no too high or no too low. And that is a little bit perplexing to me. And the way that the charter changes are written, the majority has to be of yes votes. So I pose this question, Peter. Let's say the Board of Education proposes a budget that is a minimum budget requirement. So for the people that don't know at home, you can never underspend what you spent previously unless certain triggers happen, which basically is a lower student population. So it goes to the voters. There's 1,000 people that vote, which is a pretty low number, but that could be expected in one of these types of votes. 450 of those 1,000 would vote yes. And then let's say the remaining 550 were to vote no, too high, and no, too low, split evenly. The question that I ask is who wins? Well, it looks like the majority of the people have decided that the vote was acceptable and the town council did their job and the Board of Ed did their job. But it actually would fail the vote because the majority of the votes were in the no, and they would have to go back and do it again. And with that minimum budget requirement, how low can you go? You can't go any lower than that without losing funding from the state and possibly the federal government.
And then, you know, try explaining that when you go to referendum. You know, try explaining to the people who are looking at the budget and think that the Board of Ed is, let's say they think it's too low, and they vote no because it's too low, and then it fails. Now the message that has to get out to people to get out to vote is it's too convoluted. You're never gonna. It's going to be very difficult to explain to people each referendum and what's at stake.
Yeah.
So.
This whole thing I'm finding is confusing to the population. Every time I talk to somebody, they have very little idea what's happening and why it's yes or no. But it's the whole ball of wax. You can't pick and choose any of these items. There's a lot of things being changed, and you have to vote yes for the whole batch or no for the whole batch, which is why
I'll tell you a very interesting thing is that I'm sure everybody is getting a lot of calls about what to do, and I have people who signed the petition calling, asking what to do. They didn't know what they were signing.
Yeah,
so.
I know. Chuck, you're being very patient, but this is your turn to talk about another part of this is 4-year terms and minority representation for the council, which, again, just by itself is a big deal.
Yeah,
I think.
Right now, we have 3 elected bodies in town. The town council, the RTM, which they may replace, and there'd be a Board of Finance, and a Board of Education. Board of Education, that composition is set by the state. They have 4-year staggered terms. But the town council and the RTM have 2-year terms. The people who are in favor of changing the charter, if you look at all the literature, if you look at their television programs, they don't want to talk about the fact that the town council and the Board of Finance or the RTM, which are currently 2-year terms, would go to 4-year terms. Now, you would get, in return, you'd get some kind of a budget vote, but as we've already said, the budget vote is a very blunt object. It really doesn't give a lot of guidance. Right now, as a voter, when I looked at the Charter Commission recommendations, I looked at it through the lens of, what does this do to empower me as a voter? Mm-hmm. Right now, I get a referendum, not just on the budget number, but on the people who put the budget together every other year. If I don't like the budget this year, or I don't like it next year, I don't have to do anything about, is it too high or is it too low? I can put the people who put it in, that created the budget that I didn't like, I can sweep them out of office because I get to do that every 2 years. But if we go to the new charter, town council will have 4-year terms. There's no, and the Board of Finance would have 4-year terms.
4 budgets that you don't like, that you can't do much about.
It's a long time between when I can hold the people making the decisions accountable. That diminishes my power as a voter. It cuts it in half, basically, for the town council and the Board of Finance if we were to go in that direction. For me, that's not a bad, that's a poor trade. Giving me this never-ending expensive budget referendum doesn't make any sense. If I'm losing the ability to vote for people and make that job evaluation every other year. No responsible organization really only evaluates its employees once every 4 years. So to me, that, while that is, when I went to the presentation put on by the other group, under miscellaneous changes, they listed 4-year terms. They don't want to talk about it. In their television programs, they don't want to talk about it. They said, oh, the changes this charter are going to make, these are not cutting-edge charters. These are not cutting-edge changes to the charter. But there are 169 towns and municipalities in the state of Connecticut. 88% for their primary organizations, their primary political organizations, have 2-year terms. Only 19 out of 169, 11%, have 4-year terms. But this charter would change it from 2-year terms to 4-year terms. The other thing it would do, because the RTM would be gone, the town council, the 9 members of the town council, would now be subject to minority party representation, which would mean the voters would lose the ability that we have now to make dramatic changes. In the past, we had an 8-to-1 town council with 8 members from one party and 1 member from the other party. You wouldn't have that anymore. The most you'd basically get a 6 of one party, 3 of another party, so that my power as a voter would be diminished because a candidate that I vote for in the party that I like, even though they get more votes than a candidate from another party, wouldn't be elected. Mm-hmm. It would be the minority party member that would get a seat on the council, and the person who got more votes but who wasn't in the minority party wouldn't be seated. That diminishes my right as a voter. It diminishes the power of my ballot, and it also diminishes the ultimate power of citizens, as Groton did, and it's very rare, but in the last municipal election, Groton voters decided to go from an 8 to 1 party town council to an opposite party 9 to nothing council. Now, you can argue back and forth whether you thought that was a good decision or not, but it was the decision of the voters, and they basically put in 9 members of a single party and said, you have 2 years, because 2 years you come up for our evaluation again, and if I don't like what you've done in 2 years, we can sweep everybody out, we can change that again. With minority representation, minority party representation, and 4-year terms, that power of the voters would be gone. To me, that diminishes my power as a voter, and I was looking for a charter commission that would increase my power as a voter, not decrease it.
Chuck, let me just
yes.
add into that minority representation aspect will also have consequences on the city council as well. So that's something that is not being told by the people that are in favor of the charter revision changes, and that might be deliberate, in my opinion, because they do want to have minority representation on the city council as well. Whereas, just Chuck said, it's a pretty strong Democratic leaning district, and previous to that, 30 years ago, it was a heavy Republican district. That would go away. My vote as a citizen of the city of Groton would then be diminished as well.
To your point about the 9 this year, the council before that was 8 to 1, took representation. It was 5 to 4. The voters of Groton changed their minds a lot, and they wouldn't have that ability to that extent moving forward. And there's also, maybe you're going to touch upon it, but term limits as well.
Well, no, they rejected the idea.
Oh, they did reject term limits.
Yeah. Term limits.
I take that back.
They actually listened to you all in one of your recommendations as an elected official of the town, and that's one thing that I like to mention. Previously, the town council appointed these people, but the voters appointed you. Mm-hmm. So we're actually looking at a charter revision that was rejected by the town council and only proposed by appointees.
Yeah.
And my understanding is the hearings didn't even overwhelmingly support what's happening.
That's correct.
And they had a public hearing, and the council had a public hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Neither one had a majority support.
It was fickle. I mean, the first one, and I think brought it out that the public comment, you can't always go by it only because there's a certain number of people who come out and somebody tells their friend to come in. And so the first one we had, the first public hearing, was a lot of go charter. And the second one, when people realized what was going on and was happening, was anti, not to pass it.
Yeah, and I believe a lot of the reasons for that were because they overreached. There could have been some really simple solutions with charter changes, and they didn't choose them. If you were disgruntled about the attendance of the RTM, you could have just reduced the number from one district. If you wanted to have that trigger on overspending, you could have triggered that. But they didn't choose those options, and it's unfortunate because they had a great opportunity to really remake the charter in an effective way that would, again, enact and enable voters to make good, informed decisions, but unfortunately they didn't put those things through.
Yeah, I think that's an important question, the one of voting for certain candidates and then finding out that your candidate won but doesn't get on because of the minority representation. And actually, I'm not even crazy about it with the RTM, but it does make sense with the RTM because usually a district has more than one person. So you get a mix from that district, which is probably better in some ways because you get some Republicans, some Democrats. No matter how the vote goes, you guarantee to get a mix of people representing that district. Yeah. And that probably does make sense. But that's that's going to now be both councils are going to have to
You're
do
right,
that.
Peter. And again, the RTM was that area of consensus, and Chuck has stated this many times before. The individuals that were proposing these charter changes were on the RTM for many years, and I was a colleague of theirs, and I let them speak and have their choices to make motions, and their motions failed in the marketplace of ideas. And to me, I think that was democracy in action. And one of the things that the people in favor of charter changes are, they're saying, this is democracy. This is, you have your right to vote. But if anybody's taken a civics lesson, we live in a representative republic. So, and we emulate that form of government better than any other place. And just to take note, people that were against the RTM and they want to eliminate it had always used an argument as the RTM and the town council, no other town has that. But I want to make this very clear here. There's no town in Connecticut that has a board of finance that is advisory only and has no power whatsoever. So I wouldn't want to change the powerful, united, consensus-building RTM for something that it could be ineffective and lead to chaos.
One of the things that I've noticed in the materials that are being distributed and in the programs and the presentations by the other side, there seems to be this...
Chuck and I did go to the pro groups meeting,
yes,
uncoordinated, but I was glad to see him there. And there was some I thought there was misinformation, and I have to say I'm more informed than some citizens, but almost everything I heard was very disturbing because I didn't realize how bad this was until I went to that meeting. So
I was surprised at the number of things they left out. Mm-hmm. 4-year terms were listed under miscellaneous, and to me, when you cut my voting rights in half, that's a big change, and there should be a lot more discussion on that. And there seems to be this idea that if we have a budget referendum, there is sort of automatically going to be this lower reduction in taxes. And when you look at their report, one of the things they indicated, they said, oh, 75 towns, 75 municipalities in the state have a budget referendum. So that would be a good thing. But when you look at the statistics, half of those, 63 of the 75 towns that have budget referendums are substantially smaller than the town of Groton. They're less than 20,000 people. So this idea that everybody like Groton has a budget referendum simply is not borne out by the fact. Also, only 3 of the 75 towns and municipalities in Connecticut that have a budget referendum have a lower mill rate than Groton. So this idea that we're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a budget referendum and it's somehow automatically going to lead to a drastic reduction in taxes doesn't happen. Typically, the statistics indicate, from what I've seen, that when they do have, in the towns that have referendums, when they have a referendum and they go back and they adjust the budget, they adjust it between $8,000 and $30,000. Well, if you're spending $25,000 on a referendum, it doesn't make sense. And if the referendum fails and they have to go back and make reductions, then you have to have a second referendum to review that. So now your cost is $50,000 to save, unless you're going to save a lot more than $50,000, you've wasted it. Plus, they indicate that most times it's approved on the first round. So you aren't going to have a lot of expense with these continuing referendums. But if it's approved on the first round every single time, then that means you're wasting $25,000 every year on a budget that people are happy with.
unfortunately, we are out of time. There is a forum at the Groton Public Library, October 22nd,
Yes,
7 to 8.
Yes.
Is that you debating the other side?
Correct. I will be debating their opponent, whoever's on the yes side.
Their representative.
Their representative.
And your email is going to be on the screen, I believe, if people want more information.
Yes.
These guys are available. Mm-hmm. This has been Potluck Politics, the No Show. I'm Peter Roper. Thank you guys for attending and enlightening us a little bit. Sorry it goes quickly, but I warned you. Jean-Claude Ambroise.
Yes.
Bruce Flax, Chuck Stevens.
Thank you.
Really appreciate what you're doing and coming to our show. As always, thank you, viewers. Get informed, vote no, and be well.